I've been waiting for you. Friends, it is me, Goldman, your favorite ANCAP, eco-fascist, expert on the genome theory, financer for the DBR Corporation, aka Dick and Balls Rupture Corporation, protector of the life cycle, and daddy. Those dogs of the AMS are trying to stop my plans. But don't worry, I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. I don't care if they try to get in my way or not. I am Goldman after all. I am God. I am 𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚. These AMS bitches don't know shit. They cannot contain me. I'm Goldman, my power is limitless. My aura radiates big dick energy. Fucking poopy baby AMS agents. They will all suffer. Like G did. Fucking James out here talking about how only man can control their fate and talking about the will to live. Bitch ass James talking about philosophy. The only philosophy I care for is the life cycle of nature. James has dumb brain, for if he were smart, he would know I'm right. Anyway, this is chapter 2 of the House of the Dead retrospective by Ltarget. I got to go wake up our new ruler, the Emperor. God, I'm so horny right now. You guys don't understand. Whenever I see the Emperor's blue, radiating, transparent skin, my massive 12-incher becomes fully erect. Sorry, I got a bit carried away thinking about our new ruler, the Emperor. Remember, make memes, not war. Make fuck, not kill. Goldman out, fuckers. The original The House of the Dead was proven to be extremely successful. Not only was it received extremely well, but it was among one of Sega's best-selling games, and subsequently, a sequel was put into the works. The AM1 team had now established themselves to be on the same level, and perhaps even better than AM2. Yet, for this sequel, shit was kept relatively humble. Even with a bigger budget and bigger ambitions, much of the original team from the first game are still here. Unfortunately, Hiroyuki Taguchi wasn't able to work on the game, but all the good boys I mentioned are still here. Oda, Senbonji, Oto, Kawachi, along with some new members, all putting forth their ideas, suggestions, and talents towards the game. Things were relatively smooth for the most part. Again, everyone here on the team had much input and say in what they wanted the game to be. Things were just as creatively ambitious and free for the team as it was in the development of the first game. Though it was clear from the start that there were some things that needed to be improved on. For the most part, they decided to polish up the original game more than anything, making the graphics nicer and more detailed thanks to the new Naomi system board, in fact being the only known game to have the first edition Naomi board, improving much of the gunplay and sound design, and overall a better and smoother presentation. The House of the Dead 2 is kinda like an update to the original game more or less. However, if there were to be an idea that they wanted to articulate better, it would be to go for a more lighthearted experience than the first. It's been stated that when developing the original The House of the Dead, they intended the game to be much more of an amusing experience. Which, yeah, is something that can definitely be seen with the gameplay. The very quick, fast-paced, rapid, and satisfying gunplay is extremely entertaining and enjoyable. But keep in mind that it's contrasted with
It's too late.
So, it's easy to see if some people don't really see that carefree and cheerful side of the game. Not only that, but the horror setting and the atmosphere of the game made it also very intense as well, utilizing creepy and gothic imagery to make a visually impressive and unsettling game. With the original The House of the Dead, while that lighthearted effervescence seen in the entertaining gameplay is definitely present, overall the horror elements seem to be the main takeaway. So how could you make something like The House of the Dead feel more exuberant anyway, while still keeping the horror elements present? The 1998 Kyrian case was what the events of the House of the Dead would be referred to from now on. After Rogan and G defeated Kyrian's creature and his magnum opus, the Magician, it was believed that the case was solved. Kirian simply went crazy during his research, trying to break that barrier between life and death and unleash his creatures onto the mansion. Besides, the magician killed Kirian. Anything else they needed to know died with Kirian. Needless to say, AMS decides to close the case. Nothing else was to be found and life would continue on. But there was more going on behind the scenes than they thought. This is your boy, Goldman. You see, Goldman is the CEO of the DBR Corporation, the company what Kirian worked for and financed his research in the first game. In fact, Goldman was heavily aware of what Kirian was researching. Goldman is also the big bad, and using Kirian's research develops his own version of the zombies in the House of the Dead, and unleashes them onto the city of Venice in the futuristic year of February 26, 2000. Zombies begin to overrun the city, as people get killed and the city goes into chaos and ruin. So AMS is added again to try and stop the situation and to combat the outbreak. Our cast of characters this time are James Taylor and Gary Stewart, along with the minor characters of Amy Crystal and Harry... oh my god. Harry Harris. Yes, that is... oh my god. His name's... his name's Harry Harris. Okay. Our cast of characters this time around are James Taylor and Gary Stewart, along with the minor characters of Amy Crystal and Harry Harris. Harry Harris. Oh god, fuck. James and Gary are actually trying to meet up with G from the first game, but out of nowhere, a flying gargoyle creature named Zeal appears in front of the agents. Zeal pretty much implies that G is dead and that James and Gary are going to be next, then commands a group of zombies to attack the agents. After battling through a church, James and Gary do end up finding G, alive although badly wounded. He gives them a journal detailing all of Goldman's creatures and tells them that Amy and Harry are going to back them up. After fighting more creatures, James and Gary find Amy and Harry, with Harry alluding to the 1998 Kirian case as a possible correlation for the situation, and so the four of them team up, trying to figure out who is responsible for the outbreak and how to put a stop to it. In all intents and purposes, I feel the story in of itself can be quite tense tonally. I mean, it's defo just the plot to the first game, even going through the same plot points, but the larger stakes this time makes everything feel more heavy in a way. The fact that you were fighting on a citywide scale, Goldman being a more threatening villain, and the new horrendous creatures to fight, it all creates a thick layer of tension very similar to the original game. But then that layer gets completely shattered.
We're meeting G over there. What?
Yeah, if you know anything about the House of the Dead series, at the very least you are generally aware of how bad the voice acting is. In fact, considering that the House of the Dead 2 is the most popular game of the series, you might be fully aware already of how bad 2's voice acting is in particular, even if you heard about it through other YouTubers making fun of the game for the voice acting, which is something that's completely understandable. The House of Dead 2 was hilarious, and the voice acting and writing are the main reasons for that. I can quote this game heavily and have done so many times. It definitely holds a special place in my heart for how absurd it can be, and I love it. But because of how atrociously hilarious the voice acting is, many people seem to think that the game just has unintentionally bad voice acting, and that the voice acting and writing is a product of Japanese developers not knowing how to English. Which, don't get me wrong, is definitely a possibility, but I feel there was more going on than just it being unintentional. Because The House of Dead 2 is a hilarious game. It makes me laugh whenever I play it, and it's extremely reminiscent to that lighthearted experience I feel the developers wanted with the original game. But due to how hysterical it is and how amusing the game is overall this time, it makes me think that the game was intentionally made to be this way. The voice acting and writing being incredibly awkward or straight up bad is in order to achieve a more ebullient tone, which I can't exactly prove with direct quotes or anything, as Japanese development teams kept many of the stuff behind the scenes out of the public view, but there are many suggestions and inferences that possibly suggest that this,
Don't care who it is, no one's gonna get away with this.
might have been very intentional. Ryan Dries is an actor and voice actor based in Japan. He's been in many commercial, Japanese TV shows, and anime, but has also done many video game roles as well. Some of his most notable roles are from Mega Man X7, Samurai Champloo, and quite recently in an anime movie called Detective Conan, The Fist of Blue Sapphire. Also, did you know he voices the god himself, the president of the great United States of America, Michael Wilson?
Welcome to the White House.
However, what's interesting is that many of the video game roles he himself credits personally have been mostly Sega games. He's actually voiced Jeffrey McWild in Virtua Fighter 4 and Virtua Fighter 4.5, Tom Johnson in Shenmue, and Shaquin Zhang in Shenmue 2. But what's important here is that Ryan Dries actually credits himself for the House of the Dead 2. In fact, from what I found, he's the only person to have been credited and confirmed with having a role, but even then, the closest I've gone to figuring out who he has voiced as was just additional voices. You can even find many of his acting reels on YouTube, and it is actually quite helpful to kind of understand what the devs were probably getting into. For one thing, it seems most of Ryan Dries' roles are comedic for one thing. I don't know fluent Japanese, but it doesn't take much for me to see that he's used in a lot of comedies. Not to say that he can't do serious roles, I'm pretty confident he's a talented guy, but it does seem comedy was his main theme, especially during the late 90s. So, if you were trying to make a game where you wanted the audience to take it seriously, why would you hire the guy who, around this time, was doing stuff like this? Again, some of the acting reels have legit serious acting, and I'm not trying to dismiss his credibility as an actor, but it's something to consider knowing how the game turned out. Not only that, but even in the scenes in his acting reels, both comedic and serious, he never sounds the way he does in The House of the Dead 2. He's a legitimate actor who can do the roles he's assigned to. So again, why would this be unintentionally bad if one of the actors behind it can actually act? He voiced Michael Wilson, guys. Like, come on. Like, isn't that a bit on the nose right there?
Michael!
This ain't even the first time in the series where they did something like this intentionally. It may not even matter if the voice acting and writing was intentional or not, but the reason why it's important to consider this is because of how the series has progressed and how many others have viewed the series. The voice acting and writing is incredibly important to the series, and it's become such a crucial part of the game's identity to where it's hard to ignore. Sega AM1 wanted The House of the Dead to be a lighthearted experience for those who played it, and I would say that it was. But if they want to expand on that experience, the best way to do that might have been through the voice acting and writing. So it doesn't really surprise me that The House of the Dead 2 is one of the most amusing games I've ever played. If the voice acting could be described, I think just simply monotone and one-dimensional would be the best way to present it. Because, in all intents and purposes, the voice acting doesn't really carry any presence or character to it at all. It truly lacks any personality. Like, voice actors usually can bring unique voices towards a game to make a character very distinctive and memorable. You know, proper inflection of the voice actor fully immersing themselves into the role, and the various other tools many great voice actors do to truly make their characters feel real. That's what good voice acting does. It helps you care about the world in which you are playing, and is what helps create an immersive experience. I honestly wouldn't be surprised for House of the Dead 2 if they just took random white dudes off the streets of Japan. The voice acting feels like anyone could have done it. Hell, I know many of the lines by heart, and I could probably have done the voice acting for all of the characters. Nothing about the voices sound particularly distinctive for one. Sure, you can tell that Amy was voiced by a woman, obviously, but her lines are read as if she was learning how to act for the first time. Her voice isn't really unique beyond how bad it is.
James!
Amy! Harry!
Thank God you're alright. Yes, this is Amy. Yes. Yes. It seems that Goldman left a message for us. James, come quickly! Something terrible is happening! Ah! I'm alright. But Harry's...
The voice for Amy doesn't feel as if it has any individuality to it. The same can be said about James and Gary. Again, you can tell that they are voiced by two different people, but again, the voices don't really stand out in a way that sounds normal or exclusive to the characters.
Please be safe, G.
We're counting on you, Gary.
Leave it to me. Need to hurry. What? How could anyone do this?
No one's gonna get away with this.
Amy? What happened, Amy? Only man himself can control its fate. You're nothing.
The fact that the voices don't have a certain uniqueness to them can create a detachment from the audience. Shit doesn't feel natural, or that it really belongs, and it's something that's inherited with every character in the game. Furthermore, the lack of individuality also contributes to a very emotionless presentation. Once again, great voice acting is supposed to emit the emotions a character is going through. If you want to convey anger, sadness, happiness, regret, or whatever feeling you want to convey, a good voice actor absolutely needs to communicate that as best as they can. With House of the Dead 2, that emotion is barely there. Everything is incredibly uniform. Although you do get general impressions of when characters are expressing emotion. You can tell when a character is angry, worried, or sad, but it's never articulated fully. Like, here's this dialogue between James, Amy, and Harry.
James!
Amy! Harry!
Thank God you're right.
What the hell's going on in this city?
Yeah, you can get general emotions. You can tell Amy is glad and James is frustrated, but it feels like their acting is exaggerated or that they are overacting, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like an intrinsic conversation. Whenever I play the game, I always think of it like there are a bunch of D-tier actors and actresses trying to perform Shakespeare, especially considering the very dramatic hand movements and such. I wouldn't be too surprised if that's how they legit acted in the recording session. It's like they are embellishing their characters to the point where the emotion never goes beyond the thin layer that it has, all while making the characters seem quite ridiculous. It also doesn't help the fact that the voice itself doesn't exactly convey those feelings properly to begin with. I mean, we've all seen what good voice acting does. A voice that can carefully and excellently craft sentiments is what's greatly needed to convey a story. So, expressing everything in a one-dimensional voice won't ever properly craft those feelings. The colorless nature of the voices being very devoid of any emotion, while trying to exaggerate said emotion, is quite bad, and it once again creates characters that lack personality. Although this isn't exactly a bad thing, because in a weird way, the lack of personality gives the voice acting much personality. I know that sounds odd to say, but allow me to elaborate. I think when people talk about bad voice acting being funny, I think they refer more to the juxtaposition of what's going on screen and hearing how the characters react to it. For example, right after James and Gary leave G, they hear a man scream and get attacked by a zombie with an axe, stabbing the man in the back, leaving him mortally wounded. After they kill the zombies, they approach the man dying on the floor. For something as serious as, you know, someone dying, under normal circumstances and most other games, you would expect the voice acting to sound stressful or morbid, or depending on the character, reassuring or comforting, as you'd probably expect considering a dude took an axe to the back. So, how was this situation conveyed then?
I don't want to die! My God.
Way to go, James. I think the simple, my God, easily takes the cake here. Like, really? That be the reaction we're going for? It's quite amusing. That juxtaposition is quite common throughout the whole game. Rarely do you ever feel as if you can take the game seriously for a moment. In Chapter 2, there are a bunch of corpses laying there on the ground after you just saw 4 zombies eating them, and this is legit the reaction from James.
How could anyone do this?
In Chapter 3, this is what Harry says when the 4 of them get a call from Goldman to meet him at the Coliseum.
It might be a trap, but let's go on.
Yeah, no shit, Harry. In Chapter 4, this is how James reacts when he finds out Harry is badly wounded.
Amy, Harry, are you all right?
I'm all right. But Harry's...
No!
And then as Harry's explaining where Goldman is to James, James just says,
Thanks, Harry.
and just turns his back to his dying friend. Even small stuff in Chapter 5, where he shows up to Goldman's headquarters and quite literally says,
So this is Goldman's headquarters.
as we are staring at the large all-white corporate tower with zombies defending it. Or in Chapter 6, when James and Gary encounter Goldman and James says,
Goldman! Do you know what you're doing?
like, James, the dude literally turned the Colosseum into a maze for you to fight some humanoid wearing executioner's mask while wielding a giant chainsaw. I really don't think the, oh, I had no idea you get mad at me excuse will work. Really, none of these lines would be as bad if the voice acting was better. It's just that the lack of personality coming from the characters allows everything to be humorous. It's the juxtaposition between what you're seeing on screen and how the actors and actresses are poorly conveying it. However, that juxtaposition is also greatly presented even without the context. As mentioned earlier, the emotionless voice acting, trying to be very emotional, but in an exaggerated sense, allows for the incredibly funny and laughable moments, even when the contrast of what's happening on screen isn't always there. For me, this is always seen when James says,
What? 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 What?
like, okay, you're trying to express shock and astonishment, and I get that. But you're really overemphasizing that what, but are still doing it in that very uniform tone. It's so funny. That contrast between the tone and over-exaggerating lines also creates a lot of humor and assists in giving the game a very lighthearted feeling. As I said prior, that lack of personality coming from the voice acting leaves the audience feeling detached, but in turn, it allows the audience to see behind the curtain, so to speak. It allows them to laugh at the game itself, in all of its incredible awkwardness. The uniform voice acting even gives you an opportunity to look at how awkward the writing is. I wouldn't exactly say the writing is garbo, like many people say. It's more the failure of the voice acting not communicating those emotions properly, but I would be lying if there definitely weren't some incredibly awkward lines. You got this,
Gee, bloodstain.
or this, this whole fucking dialogue.
Don't know, but it's very similar to the 1998 Curing case.
That case?
James, go and prevent the confusion in the city.
Okay.
This all being in the first chapter, by the way. Chapter 2 has some really awkward lines here.
Amy, Harry, the chaos of the city is increasing.
Well, it's about that. It seems like Goldman.
Wait, we'll talk later.
Okay. Chapter 3 has this fantastic line of dialogue.
Well, the 1998 Curing case. Guess who's behind it? It was Goldman.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Chapter 4 begins with James talking like he's texting.
What happened to Amy and Harry? Have to hurry.
And in Chapter 5, James says this.
This must be the car.
Oh wow, that is indeed the car. Thank you, James. I wouldn't have known otherwise. Though... oh god. Though easily my favorite line in the entire game probably comes from the final boss, the Emperor.
I am the one who rules over nature. I shall destroy and hate mankind.
Wow. In that very order, it might be a bit hard to hate mankind once you destroy them, but whatever works, I guess. Many lines probably wouldn't be as awkward if it wasn't for the voice acting, but man, the writing and voice acting work together beautifully, and definitely enhances the absurdity of the game. Shit's written to where it feels like they are trying to make shit seem more dramatic, considering how much they use ellipses, how much sentences pause, and just the overall language that they use, but it gives the writing a more awkward and unnatural feeling to it because of how common and frequent they use those ellipses and sentence pauses. When dialogue is written like that, it generally portrays two things. One, it can make shit seem way more dramatic and serious, or two, it can make dialogue seem very broken, making everything seem, as mentioned prior, more awkward. And weirdly enough, the House of Dead 2's writing kind of achieves both. You'll have lines where, because of how overly serious it is, that juxtaposition of the voice acting works greatly with making everything more comical. But you'll also have lines where it's clearly very broken, and you'll be laughing because of how absurdly written some of the stuff is. Of course, some lines straight up don't make any sense, like the Emperor's line I just showed you, and you can get many a belly laugh out of that due to the lack of proofreading, but mainly the writing and voice acting go hand in hand, working off of each other and intertwining together to create a very funny and farcical experience. And luckily for us, there's a character that embodies all these things about the writing and voice acting. I feel a majority of my points can be summarized simply by talking about my favorite character in all of the games, and probably one of my favorite villains in a video game. Goldman is such a well-written character, and probably not in the way that most people think. He's so well-written in that he perfectly articulates this over-exaggerated caricature, which creates a lot of comedic value in the game. He's easily the star of the game. Goldman is essentially the mega evil capitalist man, and I fucking love it, man. I think it should be obvious, seeing as how his name is quite literally Goldman, but his mannerisms say it all. Dude just sits at his desk at the top of his completely clean and white corporate tower, hands folded together with a completely stoic face, laughing menacingly and monologuing to himself in a very monotone voice. That's really his only characteristic. That lack of personality really makes him a very charming character. At the end of every chapter, you want to see what absurdly dumb thing he says. His voice is really what makes it though. What should be threatening lines gets completely contrasted with this tedium and tired voice, creating such a stark juxtaposition of tones that it makes everything very lighthearted. Like you can get when Goldman is upset, angry, trying to be sinister, or just straight up laughing maniacally. But out of all the voice acting, his lines are easily the most bland and contrast the most with what's going on in the scenes.
Dogs of the AMS. Time they made a move. It's been a while, hasn't it? My friends from the AMS. It's me, Goldman. Everything's set. All we need to do is wait.
Our Emperor shall awaken soon. Hurry, friends. At last you've come. Friends, the door of fate shall open.
It leaves you as the audience incredibly disconnected from the character of Goldman. You're hearing Goldman say all this super serious stuff, and yet he's talking in that voice the whole time. It's very meme-worthy, and it makes me happy. His lines in general are also ridiculous as well, even without considering the voice acting. I especially love how he addresses the main characters as
dogs of the AMS.
And
my friends from the AMS.
Or just simply
friends.
As if he has this obsession with the organization as a whole. It's pretty amazing. Goldman also pauses the most out of all the characters, making almost every dialogue from him incredibly perplexing. It's like he's written to pause for suspense, only for some very simplistic or downright obvious dialogue to happen, or to finish a fucking sentence for one. His dialogue can also be incredibly literal as well, and can fit in with his over-exaggerated caricature.
People of the AMS, I am Goldman. I don't care if you people try to get in my way or not. In time you'll find out who's right. This is a present from me to you.
Oh wow, you don't care if I get in your way? Gosh golly gee, how would I have known that? Also, is this present some horrible creature? Yeah, okay. Not only that, but Goldman can contrast himself a lot with the lines he says. In that same scene, you know, where he releases the giant humanoid to kill you, he says,
well, friends, I look forward to meeting you people again.
Then, why are you trying to kill me then? What? It's pretty bizarre how this is written, but that absurdity leads to some of the best and most absurd moments in the game. Although easily the best part about Goldman is the shit he's written to do. Goldman is such an anime villain. It's implied that the zombies are in his control, as if he's mind controlling them or sending them to do his bidding. Zeal even alludes to how Goldman sent him, and when he returns, says that Goldman gave him another chance, as if this creature is like his henchman or something. Even James implies it to when things get too quiet, as the zombies begin to ambush him and Gary. It's all really silly, but in a good way. At one point, he's straight up calling the agents directly as if he knows all their phone numbers. Like, part of me expects him to video chat with them directly. Although my favorite thing has got to be when he has a fucking Jumbotron in the Coliseum so he can taunt James and Gary, then proceeds to let a giant maze rise from the ground where you fight the giant humanoid creature dressed as an executioner with a massive chainsaw. It's peak anime levels if you ask me. Though what's pretty amazing in my opinion is the reveal that Goldman is not actually a mega evil capitalist man, but is actually a religious eco-terrorist. At the final chapter of the game, James and Gary finally confront Goldman, at which Goldman reveals his plan. Goldman basically believes that mankind is evil, and that by evolving too quickly, humanity basically disturbed the life cycle of nature, which he believes mankind was supposed to protect. Humanity's original sin, so to say. Which, you know, he probably could have, like, set up foundations that protect the environment and all that. Maybe fund rebuilding the Great Barrier Reef. Like, hey man, that's pretty important. No! Let me create this creature to be the ruler and emperor of mankind. That immediately says that it wants to destroy mankind. Silly Goldman, that sounds a lot like mass extinction. Wow, this godlike creature is really powerful. Let me defeat it with my handgun. After the emperor gets defeated, Goldman, in a very weird and morbid outcome, ends up committing suicide, but the fact that he says a successor will come implies that he planned all of the events, including the emperor being destroyed and his suicide, which seems incredibly ridiculous. Like, how could he even know all that? Once again, it's the anime villain. In a weird way, Goldman is like an allegory for the whole game itself. While every character has all the elements of the voice acting and writing, Goldman is a character where that hilarious and amusing complexion is more excellently charismatic and articulated in him more than any of the other characters. His voice acting and writing gives the game a much more lighthearted experience to it all, and him being an absurd villain makes the game a blast to go through. Goldman is definitely a villain that overemphasizes that tone through his very literal and over-exaggerated dialogue, the absurd and outlandish actions he does, and it all being combined with the incredibly monotone voice. It's great. The House of the Dead 2's voice acting and writing has been something incredibly important to the series. It's such an integral part of the game's identity to where the lighthearted personality is one of the most defining features of the series. Really, it's hard not to imagine yourself laughing along to the games. But this comes at a bit of a cost, as many people only see the games for being funny and not for the excellent gameplay or the incredible atmosphere. It's just there for you to laugh at. I mean, The House of the Dead 2 is probably the game that's most talked about and most admired, but whenever it's brought up, it's mainly to make fun of the voice acting. Hell, it's become so synonymous with the series that I hear many people also say the original The House of the Dead had horrendous voice acting, which I heavily disagree with. I get the voice acting of the original House of the Dead can be quite bad. The Hangman is pretty funny, the Magician is clearly just some normal dude's voice pitched down. In fact, whenever I hear Kyrion's voice, I always imagine Kyrion as one of the flamboyant good boys doing their poses like you would see in JoJo.
I must admit, I really respect your consistency. But you will never, ever defeat me. Say hello to my masterpiece.
Kyrion could basically be Dio is what I'm saying, and I love that. But even now, I find the House of the Dead to be serious tonally. There are definitely lighthearted elements to the game, don't get me wrong, but to say this line,
We won't let you have it your way, Kyrion.
Or
Sophie!
is bad voice acting is a bit jarring to me. Considering how Rogan's voice actor properly uses inflection for his lines pretty well in my opinion. Besides, this was like, what, 1996? Everybody now makes fun of voice acting from this era. You know, stuff like this.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
That.
With this disc, I shall become ruler of the entire world!
Or also this.
Oh, there's no problem with my CFOX system. No accident should have occurred. Oh!
Like, I get it. Games get old and stuff. But if I'm quite honest, The House of the Dead had some pretty decent voice acting. It makes me a bit sad, because I want others to see how beautiful the games are, how it's an atmospheric masterpiece, or how the gameplay is some of the best light gun shooting ever. Yet, the series still seems to be defined by the Dreamcast era voice acting. No one was complaining about the voice acting before. It wasn't until The House of the Dead 2 when one's voice acting was called into question. which is what leads me to heavily believe that the House of Dead 2's voice acting and writing was deliberate. Again, not that it matters much whenever the voice acting and writing was something that was intentionally bad or unintentionally bad, but it is important in that it's such an important progression for the series. I feel that regardless of whenever it was intentional or not, the voice acting and writing is what fits into the vision that Sega AM1 had. I can't really say for certain if it's intentional or unintentional because most of the evidence is highly circumstantial, and unless members of AM1 are interviewed directly about this specific detail, it's really hard to say for sure. There was a reason for me bringing it up though, because researching all of this and finding much of this circumstantial evidence made me reconsider what I thought was just a product of late 90s Japanese developers not knowing how to do proper English voice acting. I feel that leaving this information out would only seek to reinforce the preconceived notions others have had about how the series was created, and that would be a disservice towards anyone wanting to know more about the games and possibly Sega AM1 as well. Although with that being said, to say for certain that the House of the Dead 2's voice acting was intentional would also be a disservice, as I could be unintentionally misinforming you, and the last thing I'd want to do is present a vague assessment of the development and present it like fact. I feel it's my responsibility to let you know this, because I'm not Takashi Oda, I'm not Koji Oto, I'm not Kazutomo Sanbonji, or Tetsuya Kawachi, or was a member of Sega AM1. All I can tell you is what I found in my research and to present the information. Because sure, I can present one of these factoids and say this is what the team was thinking, but unless I hear it from them directly, I can't say for sure. I can't say for sure that the voice acting and writing is intentional, but I for sure as hell can't say it was unintentional either. I know a lot of people like to assume it was, but all they are really going off of is what they have heard in the game. We can't really say for sure what context this game was created in. However, I feel in either context, neither of these viewpoints contradicts or invalidates the intended effect that it had on the game. If Sega AM1 purposely went out of their way to make the voice acting and writing so D-tiered, then they accomplished their goal in making the game a lighthearted experience. However, if they just didn't know what they were doing, it still created a lighthearted experience regardless, and they further validated what their vision of the series is. The voice acting and writing matters, not just because it helped the series become more popular and well known, but because it's so humorous that it really helped the series become a more lighthearted experience. The juxtaposition between the events going on screen and hearing that ridiculous voice acting can be some of the most entertaining moments you could experience in the game. That being combined with the awkward dialogue with its sudden pauses and dialogue that makes no sense at times, it makes this game stand out a lot in the series. And it's something that all the games going forth would retain. The House of Dead 3 would be an even more comedic and lighthearted experience than 2, which is something that can also be seen with its atmosphere this time around. Hell, one of my favorite lines from the series actually comes from 3.
It looks like it'll open if we shoot it.
Like, how that's not been a meme, I will not know. The House of Dead 4 would deviate slightly in that it actually has some legit decent voice acting and writing. Though, as it is tradition now, it will still have some absurd lines and voice acting. You can even see it in the intro as well.
Still alive?
James is still randomly changing tones after all these years. Never change, man. To be straightforward about it, the voice acting and writing is essential to the identity of the House of the Dead series. Whenever those origins were deliberate or not, it's hard to deny that influence on the whole series and how it's become important to the series' identity. Simply, if the House of the Dead is the foundation and genetic makeup of the series, the House of Dead 2 is the fetus. It's really important, and the series wouldn't really be the same or even exist without it, but not gonna lie, it looks kinda ugly and it's probably better off if you just aborted it.
Thank you.